Awesome. All right, folks. I see folks are still trickling in. I'm Aurora from the Educating All Learners Alliance, or ELA for short. And thanks for joining us today at this webinar, What Does Inclusive Education Really Mean? Hosted by ELA and MCIE. So before we start, I'm just going to go over a couple of quick housekeeping items. Then I'll pass it over to MCIE to kick us off with today's content. So if you're going to come off mute to speak, identify yourself when speaking. Saying your name before you speak helps participants who are listening or who can't see the screen, helps them follow along with the conversation. We're going to use the chat and the Q&A function today for the bulk of this webinar. Feel free to use the chat to ask questions or add comments. You can also use your drop-down menu on the chat to directly message the hosts and the panelists if you don't want your question to be seen by all attendees. We have closed captioning enabled using the Zoom live transcript feature. You can turn yours on or off by clicking on the box that says CC in your control bar. That won't affect anybody else's view or field of vision. You can also drag and drop the box that contains the captions anywhere on your screen. So you may have noticed that we're recording today's session. ELA does that so we can share it on our YouTube page. We can archive it, share it out with folks who weren't able to join today's session. We always edit out sensitive information or personal stories, things like that, before we share the final recording on YouTube. So there's going to be links, emails, resources, all kind of great stuff shared in the chat today. And after the webinar, I will send all of that info out along with the recording link to all the participants and all the folks who registered. So don't feel like you have to, hurriedly write everything down unless you want to. All right, I've got a couple more folks joining us in the chat. Take a moment to introduce yourself. Let us know what kind of work you do, and let us know where you're coming from today. And okay, great. I'm going to kick us off officially. Welcome to today's webinar, What Does Inclusive Education Really Mean? Hosted by the Educating All Learners Alliance, or ELA for short, and MCIE. My name is Aurora Dreger, and I'll be your host. So I'll share some information about ELA. We are a coalition of organizations dedicated to producing and sharing resources, programs, and events just like this, focused on supporting students with disabilities and learning differences, those who teach folks with learning disabilities and learning differences, anybody who's in the field of special education. We are your resource center. Your presenters today are Tim Villegas and Carolyn Teaglin from MCIE. I'll be monitoring the chat and assisting with the Q&A portions of the webinar. And I'll pass it over now to Tim and Carolyn to kick us off.
Hey, everybody. My name is Tim Villegas, the Director of Communications for the Maryland Coalition for Inclusive Education, and I am joined by our CEO, Dr. Carolyn Teaglin. You want to say hi, Carolyn?
Good morning, everyone.
We're a fully remote working team. As you can see, I'm in my bedroom and Carolyn is out in the field. So we're really excited to share this information. We are a proud member of ELA. So Aurora, thank you for helping us set this up. So we're going to talk about one of my absolute favorite topics. And I have like the absolute best job in the world because I get to tell people about not only about inclusive education, but about how MCIE supports all learners in their neighborhood schools, and we support school districts. So let's just get right into the content here. Today, we're going to talk about what is inclusive education. So we have a working definition that we have. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about why you should include learners with disabilities. Chances are you already have your why if you're on this call. So we're really excited that you joined us here. And we're also going to talk about the how, and we're really going to talk about how we start, because there's a lot of starting is the start is where we're going to talk we're going to talk about where we start, but then how we implement is always a little bit different. And then we're going to talk about options for partnership with MCIE. So we are a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to advancing the success of all children and youth in school communities. And our mission is to be the catalyst for the meaningful and successful inclusion of all learners in their neighborhood schools. We primarily do, I like to say 3 things, and then we have kind of a bonus thing. So the one thing we do is school transformation. And we typically have a 3 to 5 year partnership with our partner school districts. We're going to talk a little bit more about what that means later. We also provide professional development and workshops. So though we may not be in a partnership with a district over a number of years, we can provide customized professional development for a school district. And then we also provide individual learner planning, where we provide support to a school district and a family to create an inclusion plan, and that's centered around person-centered planning. And then the 4th thing, and kind of the bonus thing that we do, is our dissemination. So you may be familiar with the Think Inclusive podcast. It's a weekly podcast that I host and interview a number of people across the education landscape to talk about inclusion and inclusive education. There's also the blog posts that we do on thinkinclusive.us, and also our newsletters. And we also have a lot of resources on our website. So if you go to mcie.org/MCIE-resources, and we'll provide that link in a little bit, you can find a lot of what we're talking about today. So I'm going to hand this over to Carolyn, and we're going to talk about where inclusion occurs.
So, hello, everyone. The first thing we want to talk about is that virtually the only place that you go where children are excluded or segregated is school. You know, we don't exclude children at our worship centers, the marketplace, in our recreational areas, in our neighborhood. Generally, we're all inclusive in those places, and anyone is welcome. However, at school, we have a long history of segregating learners with disabilities from the general education population. So the first thing that we talk about is place. So in order to be included, you have to actually be physically in the place of school. So what we first work on is having learners attend their neighborhood schools in their typical classrooms in the general education setting with their age-appropriate peers. So the first idea is to get these children who are in segregated settings into their neighborhood school if they're in some kind of segregated location. And then once they're in their schools, working to have them in the classroom with typically developing learners and age-appropriate peers. So the first thing we talk about is membership. If we can all reflect on places where we are a member, whether it's a book club or a gym membership or a worship center that we belong to, and that feeling that we have when we feel like we really are a member who is valued for our unique talents and gifts. And that membership leads to a sense of belonging. And we know that a sense of belonging is critical for, number one, learning to occur, because if I feel uncomfortable, I feel like an outcast, I feel like I don't belong, it's going to be difficult for me to learn. And we also know there's a wide body of research that says that when I feel a sense of belonging, it's good for my mental health. I'm less likely to have anxiety, depression, that I'm less likely as a high school student to drop out of school. So we really want to foster that sense of belonging and all of the things that means. And you just look at the faces in these photos. When we feel belonging, we feel happy. We always like to talk about the bottom left-hand panel, the children eating lunch together, because we often see children who are in segregated settings included in the cafeteria. But often that looks like the learners with disabilities sitting to the side, often with an adult support, not necessarily sitting among their age-appropriate peers. So we really want everyone to think about all places in the school, all activities in the school, and how we ensure that learners are with their typically developing peers in an equal status role, learning and socializing and participating in those school activities together.
This is a short video of one of our friends, Blake. In this video, he is in first grade. Now, how we get to this video is Blake was included, fully included in a first grade class, but there were some challenges in the regular cafeteria. And so there were some behavior challenges, some sensory challenges. And so what the team decided to do was to have lunch in the classroom, but still not segregating Blake, but having an opportunity for Blake to interact with his peers in his class. So let's just watch this video.
Yes or no? Yes or no, Blake? Yes or no? The first Blake person. This size of glass is deep. Yes or no? Yes or no? Do they have everything down?
Now, Blake may not necessarily be interacting with every single one of those students, but you can see that the class wants to interact with Blake. And so when, like what Carolyn said before, a lot of times when we have learners with disabilities in the cafeteria, even in the classroom, sometimes they're there, but they're not actually involved in the life and the community of the class. So this is an example of that. Clearly his peers want to interact with them. So to recap, place is number one, 2 is membership or belonging, and 3 is participation. So what is everyone doing in the classroom? In the panel at the bottom, and the learner in the center, this is Lily. Lily has Down syndrome. And in this picture, she is participating in the life of the class, just, passing things over, and she was fully included. I don't know what grade she is in this particular picture. I don't remember.
5th grade.
5th grade?
7th grade.
Oh, 7th grade. Thank you. But the idea is when we include learners, they should be doing everything that everyone else is doing. And if we're having authentic participation, that also means we're having authentic engagement. And so we really love this quote by Ann Benninghoff, the author of Specially Designed Instruction. If participation and engagement drops, so does learning. So that is the third element that we talk when we talk about inclusion. We talk about placement, we talk about membership, and belonging. We talk about participation, and then finally, we have learning. So I like to tell this story when we're giving our presentations because my background is I worked in segregated and disability-specific classrooms when I was a special education teacher. And a misunderstanding that I had when I was learning about inclusion and trying to, provide inclusive practices and bring inclusive practices to my school was, well, I teach in a self-contained class, but, I am giving access to the grade level curriculum. I'm making sure that my students are making progress toward grade level performance. Some self-contained classrooms, they just watch movies all day, but I am trying to actually have them learn. I'm teaching them self-advocacy skills. I'm helping them self-regulate. I want them to graduate and contribute to be a full member in society. The problem is that I didn't have the placement part. And I thought, well, self-contained and special education classrooms can coexist as long as we're giving access to the grade level curriculum. And what I learned is that that's just not inclusive. I may be a good teacher. I may be providing instruction and I may be providing access to grade level curriculum. But when we're talking about inclusion, is what it comes back to what Carolyn was talking about is you have to be there to be included. All right, Carolyn.
Okay, so here's Blake again. This is several weeks later. So in the first video, you saw that Blake was a member of his class, but he wasn't necessarily fully engaged in participating. He was still learning how to be an equal status learner among his age-appropriate peers. Here, a few weeks later, you can see that not only is Blake a member of his class, he's fully participating in instruction, and he is not only learning, he's leading.
Okay, Blake, you're going to be our drill sergeant today for our daily review of letters and sounds. Go ahead. Tell them.
A, apple, A, B, B, C, C, D, D, E, N, N, F, G, G, H, I, H, J, J, K, K, L, M, N, O, octopus, P, Q, R, S, snake, T, U, up, V, W, X, Y, Z,
Any other takeaways from this, Carolyn?
Yes, just it's hard because the quality of the video didn't come through as well as it could have. But at one point, he actually pauses because his classmates did not. So what they're doing is he's pointing to the letter and they're saying letter sound. And at one point he pointed to the letter and they did not respond. And he turns around and looks at them like, come on, guys. So he really has become a full member of his classroom, which leads to his participation in learning, which is really exciting to see. And this is a child that weeks before was in a separate segregated setting in a separate school. So now not only is he attending the neighborhood school where he belongs, he's in the classroom with his typical peers participating and making great outcomes for himself.
Well, and you were just saying, actually, before we got onto the webinar that you believe Blake graduated with his peers, right?
Yes, I believe that Blake graduated with a standard diploma on time, which would not have been possible if he had remained in that segregated setting that he had originally been placed in.
Fantastic.
So what we're going to talk about now is core instruction and specially designed instruction. So core instruction, meaning what happens in the general education classroom through the general education curriculum, what we call in our organization, Tier 1 instruction, is what every child gets. And when a child has a disability, in addition to receiving core instruction in general education, they also receive specially designed instruction that helps support their learning needs so that they can access the on-grade level content. So in this picture, this is Ashley. Ashley has Rett syndrome, and she does not use her voice to speak. She uses eye gaze software. And in this photo, she's a 7th grade learner who is learning alongside a peer, just as her typical peers would be doing. And this learner and her peers all know how to communicate with her through her eye gaze software, through her communication device, which is her voice. Here are some other pictures of learners who are fully included. The top right, again, is Ashley with her science teacher. And Ashley's science teacher, that's our general education teacher, is trying to assess the concepts that Ashley has learned through the lesson that she just taught. The bottom left-hand picture is a picture of a learner who needs some supports in order to fully participate on the carpet with his peers. He has sensory needs, so sitting on the carpet is not necessarily appropriate for him because it overstimulates him. But if he's given alternative seating and the headphones to decrease the noise, he's able to fully participate. So sometimes it's just really figuring out the planning aspects, what a learner needs in order to be able to participate fully with their age-appropriate peers.
So briefly, we're going to talk about why. Again, you're here because you probably already have a why that learners with disabilities should be included. But there's a clear precedent in the law. in the law, it talks about that special education is a service, not a place. But when we are talking about IDEA placement requirements and about removals, there's a lot of instances of learners being removed from a general education environment because they, quote unquote, need modifications. And so it explicitly says in the law that is not a reason to remove. Now, there is language about removals for behavior impacting learning, but we also must consider the full range of services, including behavior support for the learner. Have we tried everything to support the learner in the general education environment with behavior? So the law is a why. The other why is the research. I don't know if you're familiar with the new large-scale study that came out. I believe it might have been earlier this year or late last year, with 24,000 adolescents who qualified for special education. And the researchers discovered that spending a majority of the day, at least 80% in general education, improved reading scores by 24 points and math scores by 18. So when you look at the large body of research that we have, children with disabilities do better academically and socially, and children without disabilities do better.
I just want to also share a piece of research that I think is very important for educators to know. The greatest single factor in determining whether or not you were included in general ed as a learner with a disability is not the significance of your disability or the type of disability that you have. It's your zip code. It's really about the mindset of the educators in your neighborhood where you live, and whether or not they're open to the idea of including you in their classes. So change is a challenge. And if you are not an inclusive system or you're not an inclusive school, it seems insurmountable at first. And especially if you don't have the knowledge or the skills or what you see as the capacity to know how to do this work, it always seems impossible. And it is hard work, but everything that's worth doing is hard work, and it always seems impossible until it's done, to quote Nelson Mandela. So what is standing in the way of including all learners? We think that there are three main things. First is fear. Fear of failure, fear that I don't know what this looks like, fear that I might somehow fail this child or fail the other learners who this child is going to be learning alongside of. So fear tends to be the first thing. The second seems to be a lack of capacity or skills. So, okay, maybe I really have a desire to do this work. I really want to be inclusive. I want to see learners with complex learning needs in the general education setting. I just don't know how to do it. Or I'm a general educator. I don't have the capacity to know how to support that learner in my classroom. Or I'm a special educator and I only know how to do this in a segregated setting with other children with disabilities. I'm not sure what my role is if I'm going to be in a general education classroom. And the third thing is the core belief systems that you may have. And a lot of us grew up in a world where segregating learners with disabilities was what we saw, it's what we learned, it's what we knew. And a lot of us were educated to educate in a manner that isolated children with disabilities away from their peers. So it's really about changing that belief system. We believe that this is a civil rights issue, that all learners should have access to the general education setting. And we also believe that you can't replicate what happens in a general education setting in a segregated classroom. You can't replicate the energy. You can't replicate the conversations. You can't replicate the organic nature that is the general education classroom.
And so when we talk about inclusive education, we're laying out a vision. Each and every child who lives in our school district belongs in my school. That's why we talk about neighborhood schools. All children are general education students, and then some also receive services. There's no such thing as an inclusion class, right? If we have an inclusion class, what does it make all the other classrooms? Students are not separated by label into disability-specific programs. Services are delivered through collaboration between general education and special education teachers. Planning for students who need more. We go through membership, participation, and learning tools. Oh, and I forgot to mention at the beginning, membership, participation, and learning come from a framework developed by researchers at the University of New Hampshire, Michael McSheehan, Carol Jorgensen, in their Beyond Access model. Really, the only thing that we're adding to that in making our own is talking about placement as being the number one thing. And then interventions are provided for all learners who need them. At MCIE, we have a framework for inclusive schools. This is a lot of text, so we're going to break this down in a minute. But I want to let you know that this is on our website at mcie.org, and you just click on the school transformation page. We are going to provide more information about this. But if just at a glance, this is what we have. So really at the top, we're talking about leadership, and we have some bullet points there, and then school-wide systems, classroom instruction, and interventions and supports. So Carolyn, I'm going to take in. We only have a few minutes, so I guess we'll try to,
muscle through.
Yeah.
All right, so very quickly, we have a framework for inclusive schools. It includes leadership. So the most important thing we find about inclusion working is the leadership of the district or the school that wants to be inclusive. So the leadership has to have a vision, even if they're not sure how to make that vision a reality, and that they have to have an ability to collaborate with the educators on their team. We believe that there needs to be a lot of adaptive professional learning and coaching in order for folks to be able to do this work well, and that the leader has to develop really robust family and community partnerships. We have a school-wide systems for this work. It's strategic change. We really work through a system of modifying what this work looks like for behavior, social, and emotional learning, the school-wide expectations for instruction, and the use of research-based curriculum, because we know that what happens in general ed has to be high quality to begin with in order for specially designed instruction to be effective, and that we need to build a schedule that allows co-teachers planning time to co-plan and to collaborate and make decisions about their instructional decision-making, as well as decision-making around peers. So also there needs to be a vision for classroom instruction, that there are positive, clearly defined routines and rituals that all learners need, not just learners with disabilities, that lessons are universally designed and differentiated to support the learning needs of the learners in that classroom, and that collaborative teaching happens on a routine basis, and when both educators are in the classroom, both educators are used meaningfully. So we really try to work through leadership of what that collaboration looks like, so that all learners are owned by all educators. And that all learners who need interventions and supports have access to that, in addition to core instruction. So that if I need something more, whether or not I have a disability, there are tiered interventions in place for learners who need them. And that data is used on a regular basis to make decisions about whether the interventions that learners are in are effective, or if something different needs to happen.
All right, so you're probably wondering, okay, this is all great, but how do we do it, Tim and Carolyn? This is the how, this is where you start. And so we have developed the quality indicators of inclusive schools. You can go on our website. It's the first thing that's listed under MCIE resources, or you can use the QR code that's on your PowerPoint screen right now. This is a self-assessment tool. Now, there are instructions in the tool. You can go ahead and do this. If you're a school leader, you can go ahead and implement, start the assessments tool with your leadership team. But we would love to do this with you. That is why we are here. And so I would first download this. And typically when we're working with schools and we're partnering with schools, this is where we start. We have to figure out, well, what are our priorities? Where are our weak area, challenge areas? Where are the areas that we're strong in? And so download this. Make sure you take a look at it. And if you have any questions, we'd love to know about it. And you can always contact us at mcie@mcie.org. I'll let you take this, Carolyn.
So if you were to want to partner with us, this is what partnership with MCIE might look like. We do work with schools and districts on school transformation. We meet with districts a few initial times to get started and to kind of really explore what the school or district needs. We develop a team for implementation at both the district and the school level. We identify initial demonstration schools. We generally say that if a district is large, we start with 2 to 3 schools to begin with as demonstration sites. If a district is small, sometimes there's only 1 or 2 schools in the district to begin with. In the first year, we work to develop a shared understanding of inclusion between the members of the school's leadership team and also the members of the school in and of itself. So all stakeholders are involved in these conversations in that first year so that everyone understands what we are trying to work towards in terms of what we're saying inclusion is. The second year is a restructuring of role, services, and supports in order to begin to include learners that have been typically segregated. And the third year and beyond is expansion and refinement. And we find that it typically takes a minimum of 3 years for a school to transform, sometimes a little longer than that. You could go to the next slide because I know we're kind of running lean on time.
Yeah.
We also, in addition to school transformation, if you're not quite there yet as a district, we do offer customized professional development and workshops on a variety of topics. The topics are listed here. It's everything from the quality indicators that Tim mentioned earlier to barriers and solutions, adapting lessons and what that looks like, collaboration. We have a lot of great tools for team planning and teaching to deliver specially designed instruction, and co-teaching. What exactly is that? What does it look like, and how do we do that? And then we also offer to districts individual learner planning. So if you have learners with complex support needs that you're really struggling to understand how to fully include or how to include more, we have a 2-step process that we have found to be very effective in transitioning a learner from a more segregated setting into the general education classroom. And this is learner specific. So it's one learner at a time. So we don't do this with all learners. We would do it with learners who are presenting with some particularly complex needs.
All right. I think we did it. Great job. Great job, Carolyn. We would love to answer any questions that you have about, the information that we provided or anything else that's on your mind regarding inclusive education. Please consider joining our mailing list, downloading our resources, following us on social media. You can always listen to Think Inclusive on your favorite podcast app, and you can always support us.
Thanks, y'all. This is Aurora from ELA. We have a few minutes on our schedule, so anybody in the chat, anybody out there, the attendees, you can use the Q&A button on your control panel. You can type it in the chat. I believe you have to request permission to come off mute. That's just the way that Zoom webinars is situated. But if you have questions for Carolyn and Tim, now is your time. Let us know. And we also just dropped in the chat some links, the same links that are up on the slide, so that way they're in the chat. And again, these will be emailed out to everybody who registered, whether they were able to attend or not today. If you registered, you'll get these links and the recording link in your email in a few days.
Sure. And just to reiterate, although I don't think it's specifically stated in the slides, we are the Maryland Coalition for Inclusive Education, but we work with districts all over the country, including Illinois, Virginia, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and that list is growing.
Thank you. Yeah, I was gonna ask about what does MCIE stand for, which I know what it stands for, but is it specific to Maryland? But that's where you guys started, right? Is that kind of the origin of MCIE? Great.
Yeah, so it is the origin of MCIE, and we still do have a lot of partners in the state of Maryland. However, the outreach has grown over the years, and there are more and more districts who are interested in doing this work. And we are always happy to partner with those districts. We have a team of professionals that travels, and like Tim said at the start, I'm in the field today. We are actually all out in the field more than we're in our virtual offices.
Well, we get a lot of questions about a lot of families and a lot of parents that email us and say, we want you to work with our school district. And let me see what's in this. Do you have any partners in California? Not currently. But again, we will partner with anyone, including districts in California. So a lot of times families will contact us and say, my student is in a segregated setting. I really want to bring inclusive practices to my child's district. Can I hire you to work with my district? Well, unfortunately, that's not how it works. Because what we want to do is we want to partner with a school district that wants us. And sometimes if that is coming from a parent, it may not be as collaborative as we want it to. So we want the school district. Now as a parent or family member, you can always let the school district know that we are a resource that's available. But we want to partner with school districts, who are interested in moving towards inclusive practices. And as a family member, you can always download any of our resources and share them with the school team.
We've got a great message in the chat. I'm going to read it out loud, Christina. Christina Howell says, this is so awesome. I work for MT Empowerment Center, Family Support Liaison. It has always been my dream to have general ed and special ed to collaborate together, which really resonates with me also. I remember being in the classroom myself and being kind of thrown into co-teaching situations with like little to no preparation, little to no like true meaningful like collaboration there. So yeah, thank you for sharing, Christina. MCIE, they're definitely the folks who are making that gen ed and special ed collaboration happen.
Yeah, and it's it is happening, right, Carolyn? I mean,
it's happening, and it's happening in some very challenging places. I was just in a classroom last week in Baltimore City, who has been working with us for a number of years. So they have really done the hard work. But in Baltimore City, you're talking about class sizes of 33, and I was there on the afternoon of state testing. So these middle schoolers had been in state testing all morning, and I walked into their classrooms in the afternoon, and beautiful co-teaching structures were happening. Classes of 33, 34 kids fully engaged, middle school kids in May after state testing. And it's just a testament to the real power of the work when you jump into the change process.
I'd like to address this question. So I think Christina asked it. So how do you get a school district to desire for inclusive environment at the middle school and high school level? And Carolyn, jump in here too. I think one of the big ways is to share stories, to share success stories. No amount of research or white papers are going to convince anyone to move towards inclusive practices. Typically, people change their minds because they are personally affected and they have a story that they're going through, an inclusion journey that they're going through, or they hear about the journey and story of a school district or a family pursuing inclusive education in their school district. So that's why one of the we invest a lot of our work in content creation. And so I would encourage you to look at some of the podcast episodes that are available in our Think Inclusive feed, and pick ones that would resonate with the school leaders in your middle and high schools. I just had a conversation with Mirko Chardin, who's the co-author of Equity by Design. Great conversation. Our conversation with Katie Novak, who was the author of UDL Now. When you share stories, oftentimes the listener will put themselves in the stories and maybe change their mind when they hear other people. Do you have more information for inclusion for moderate severe population that I can share with my director? Well, going back to the podcast, I hate to harp on that, but there's just so many different topics. And we recently reproduced a episode about including students with complex support needs. And that was a conversation with some people from the TIES Center, which was really good. So if you want to take a look at that, it's, I believe, called including learners with more extensive support needs. So that's a great resource.
And if you wanted to have a conversation about what that looks like, because it's a little bit more in depth than we can answer in a question on a webinar, we have a whole process that we use to plan for inclusion of learners with complex support needs in general education settings. It's been very successful. So, if you wanted to contact us, we would be happy to have a conversation about that.
Yeah, in our resources page, there are some learner planning tools that you can look at too, but definitely contact us. There's a question in the Q&A. Cross-movement solidarity seems promising. Have you had any success with communities around this? If I understand the question, I think that, when we're partnering with school districts and just in general, as we're, promoting inclusive practices, we want this, we're talking about equity for all learners, not just learners with, disabilities. And so we want this message not only to be for, special education teachers, special education directors, but this message is for any school leader, and especially leaders that are at the associate superintendent level or directors of curriculum and learning, or teaching and learning, because we're really talking about all learners. So, and equity isn't just for one particular group; it's for everyone. I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add, Carolyn.
No, if I'm understanding the question correctly, I agree 100%. And I didn't say this earlier, but I led a district as the associate superintendent for curriculum instruction that embarked on this journey with MCIE back in the early 2000s. And we went from a highly segregated school system with center-based programs to a fully inclusive school system. It took us about a little over a decade, but we maintained it for 2 decades under the change of four superintendents. So what I will say is that when you get to the place where it's an institutionalized practice to be inclusive, all learners view diversity as a part of what the classroom should look like. So it's just typical to have children that with a variety of learning needs and supports, or extension needs, or whatever it might be, that children are used to seeing a variety of learners in their classroom, and it becomes normalized.
Absolutely.
Well, we're just about at time, folks. This is Aurora from ELA. If there are any last questions, type it in the chat or feel free to get in touch with MCIE. I'm going to drop that one more time in the chat, the links and the ways to stay involved with MCIE. So on behalf of ELA and MCIE, thank you for joining us today for our webinar. Please take a moment to fill out our survey if you have a chance. This is let us know what you liked, how we could improve, or what topics you want to see in the future have hosted on an ELA webinar. So remember to check out our website, educatingalllearners.org. Follow us on Twitter at educateall_org. And be sure to check out MCIE at their website, mcie.org. Keep an eye out for that email with the links and other information that was shared today. And yeah, on behalf of everybody over at ELA, thank you so much, Carolyn and Tim. It was really great learning with you today.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody.